When your own child calls you a parasite, something inside you dies quietly, not from pain, from disbelief. That was the day Margaret Woods stopped being afraid of silence. For years, she'd paid every bill, every mortgage installment, every car repair, even the gym membership her daughter-in-law never used. "Just until we get back on our feet, Mom," her son Andrew said. But their feet had been steady for years. It was their hands that had forgotten how to hold their own weight. At 71, Margaret finally realized she was financing not a family, but a habit. The habit of comfort at her expense. And like every addiction, it only grew bolder. That morning she overheard it. Not shouted, whispered. Clara, her son's wife, hissing through the phone to a friend. "She's still here, won't move out. God, she's like a parasite that just won't die." Margaret froze by the kitchen door. In her hands, 2 cups of coffee, one for each of them. She set them down on the counter and simply walked out. The hallway light flickered. Even the house seemed tired of pretending. That night, she opened a clean notebook and wrote 3 words at the top. Plan for freedom. Below, 3 steps, each line written slowly, deliberately, as if she were building a bridge across a river. 1. Cancel every automatic payment. 2. Sell the house. 3. Leave without a scene. She underlined the last one twice. She looked around her bedroom. The floral wallpaper, the photo of Tom, her late husband, still smiling in his army uniform. She whispered to him, "Guess I'm finally redeploying, Tom." The next morning, she called Diane Hall, a real estate agent she'd once taught in middle school. "Diane, I want to list my house." "Your house, Mrs. Woods? Are you sure?" "Very, but no scented candles. Let it smell like a real life." By noon, the listing was live. The photos showed sunlight gliding across clean wooden floors like memories that refused to fade. The headline read, "One owner, taxes paid, solid bones." The owner, Margaret Woods. That night, she packed a small suitcase and checked into a modest motel near the library. The bathroom tiles were chipped, the bed creaked, but the silence was clean. She placed Tom's photo on the nightstand, slid the notebook beneath the pillow, and exhaled, really exhaled, for the first time in years. She opened her laptop. Account by account, she clicked cancel, heating, insurance, internet. Even the car payment Andrew had temporarily linked to her card. Cancel, cancel, cancel. Not from anger, from clarity. Then she drafted a letter, a declaration of boundaries, not to hurt, but to mark where her life began again. Andrew, Clara, I'm not your credit card. I'm not your safety net. I'm a person who has earned her peace. I've canceled all auto payments. I'm selling the house. I will pay your first month of rent and the deposit. After that, it's your turn. If you wish to talk calmly, I'm here. If you wish to yell, yell into the wind. Love, Mom, or Margaret, whichever you prefer. She sealed the envelope, not yet knowing when she'd deliver it. But the act itself felt like reclaiming oxygen. The first showing happened on Thursday. A young couple with 2 children tiptoed through the rooms, as if afraid to disturb old ghosts. "It smells like pie," the woman said. "It's the house," Margaret smiled. "It remembers warmth." The second showing, a quiet man with the hands of a musician. "I grew up in corridors like this," he said softly. "They make you feel safe." "They still can," Margaret replied. By Saturday, a family came, parents and an elderly mother with a cane. The older woman brushed her fingers along the wall. "Good bones," she said. "This place still breathes." They offered full price, no negotiation. Diane's voice trembled slightly when she called. "We have a buyer." "Then we have closure," Margaret said. That same evening, Andrew called, angry, bewildered. "Why did you cancel my insurance payment? I needed to drive today." "Because I'm no longer paying." "We're family." "Exactly. Family isn't a transaction." "Andrew." Silence. Then a sigh that sounded almost like fear. "You can't handle it alone, Mom." "I already am." At dusk, her old friend Susan stopped by the motel with a thermos of tea. "You'll weather the storm," Susan said. "You always do." "I don't want a storm. I just want quiet doors." "That is the victory, love." Margaret smiled. That night, she added a fourth step to her plan. 4. Don't argue with ghosts. 5 days felt like 5 winters. Margaret filled them with silence, books, and coffee that never tasted right. Every night she rehearsed what she might say in court, and every morning she erased it. You can't script truth, she thought. You can only survive it. The courthouse was a gray cube of stone and fluorescent light. Cold, polished floors echoed every step like judgment. She could feel eyes on her, strangers curious how a mother could be sued by her own son. Inside the courtroom, the air smelled of paper and nerves. Clara sat in her beige suit, back stiff, lips pressed thin. Andrew kept his eyes down, his tie slightly crooked. The same boy who once cried when his toy broke. Only now he was breaking her instead. Margaret sat quietly at the defense table. Her hands were folded, not clenched. In front of her, a single file folder, thin but heavy with 40 years of proof. When the judge entered, everyone rose. Margaret's knees cracked softly. Time never missed its cue. The judge, a woman with calm gray eyes, looked between mother and son. "Mrs. Woods," she said, "you understand the purpose of this hearing?" Margaret nodded. "My son believes I've lost my mind because I decided to use it." A few chuckles rippled through the crowd. The judge hid a smile behind her glasses. "Proceed." Clara's lawyer stood first, voice smooth as glass. He painted Margaret as confused, vulnerable, manipulated. "She's been under emotional stress since her husband's passing," he said. "She may not realize the financial harm she's causing her family." Margaret waited until he finished every word. Then she rose. "Sir," she said calmly, "I've been paying bills, taxes, and mortgages longer than you've been alive. If responsibility were confusion, the whole world would be lost." The room chuckled again, softer this time, but warmer. Andrew shifted uncomfortably, pretending to check his watch. Then came the evidence. A folded, faded letter, her husband's handwriting, an informal will calling the house a family inheritance. Clara's lawyer waved it like a flag. "This proves intent," he said. "Her late husband meant for the home to stay in the family." Margaret took the letter, running her fingers along the edges. The ink had bled slightly. He'd written it during his final weeks, when even his hands trembled. She looked at the judge. "Your Honor, my husband wrote this when he could barely breathe. He called it an inheritance because he hoped love would outlive him. But inheritance means responsibility, not entitlement. And love isn't a deed you can forge." The judge examined the paper, then placed it aside. "It's unsigned, invalid. You may continue, Mrs. Woods." Margaret took a slow breath. "For 40 years, I gave that home my work, my time, my spine. I watched birthdays, funerals, arguments, and laughter echo in those walls. I built it, I kept it, and I buried my husband from its porch. But love without respect becomes debt, and I won't owe anyone my dignity." The courtroom went silent. Even the clock seemed to pause between ticks. The judge finally spoke. "Mrs. Woods, you are within your rights to sell the property. Case dismissed." Bang of the gavel. Just like that. Years of guilt dissolved into air. Clara gasped. "This isn't fair." The judge turned. "Fairness doesn't always favor comfort." "Ma'am." Margaret gathered her papers. Her hands didn't tremble. Outside, flashes of cameras, reporters sniffing for a story. She ignored them. The only story worth telling was the one she was still writing. On the courthouse steps, the sky was beginning to break open. Light through gray. Diane waited by the car holding 2 cups of coffee. "You looked fearless in there," she said. I was terrified, Margaret replied, but I remembered, fear means you still care what happens next. They drove to a small cafe a few blocks away. The place smelled like cinnamon and freedom. Margaret took her first sip, hot and bitter, and smiled. I don't know what peace costs, but I think I can finally afford it. Diane slid her phone across the table. Your story's everywhere, she said. Someone recorded your statement. Half the town's sharing it. Margaret frowned. Why? Because you said what everyone's too afraid to say, that love doesn't mean servitude. For the first time in years, Margaret laughed. A soft, shaky laugh. The sound of release. That evening, she walked home on foot. Her motel was small, but the air felt lighter there. In her notebook, she crossed off step 3, leave without a scene. Then she added another line. Step 4, walk out proud even when no one's watching. Before bed, she checked her phone. One unread message from Andrew. It said only, "Why are you doing this to us?" She didn't reply. Because it wasn't to them. It was for herself. She placed the phone face down, turned off the light, and whispered into the dark. Tom, I finally stood up. Not against them, just for me. Outside, a train horn moaned in the distance. A long, lonely sound, but not sad. It was the sound of movement. And as she drifted to sleep, Margaret smiled, realizing something profound. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it sounds like the quiet click of a door closing. Gently, permanently. If you want to measure freedom, don't count dollars. Count mornings when no one demands an explanation for your breathing. Margaret woke into that kind of morning. Thin winter light slid across the ceiling like a quiet promise. Kettle on, notebook open, a day with no apologies scheduled. She had moved into the small studio above the library, a narrow bed, a table by the window, a shelf for the books she was still willing to carry from one life to the next. On the sill sat a tin tag that read, Real Owner. It caught light in a way that felt deliberate, as if the sun itself approved. She kept a rule now, one useful thing before noon. Some days it was sorting donated paperbacks in the basement room that smelled like dust and stories. Some days it was walking to Mrs. Lerner's apartment with soup and a listening ear. Once a week, she took a shift at the community kitchen, sleeves rolled up, steam fogging her glasses. Work she didn't have to explain, work no one could take for granted. At 10, she would descend the old wooden stairs to the reading room, leave her phone turned face down, and read as if the lines might hold tools. Not escape. Equipment. She underlined sparingly. One note in the margin read, Love is not a payment plan. Word about the court case traveled. Not the gossip, not the ugliness. Something softer. A librarian whispered it to a teacher. The teacher mentioned it to a church group. A short article appeared in the local paper. She paid for everything. Then she bought her piece. People began leaving little folded notes at the circulation desk with her name on the outside. Thank you for saying what I couldn't. Your courage made me set a boundary with my son. I slept for the first time in months. I thought I was cruel. Maybe I was just tired of drowning. Margaret read them and folded them back. Not trophies, compasses. Proof that silence, when chosen, can be a language. Diane stopped by one afternoon, cheeks pink from the wind. Your buyers love the house, she said. They planted an apple tree. Good, Margaret said. That yard needed a second heartbeat. Diane hesitated, then added, They found something under a floorboard while refinishing the hallway. An envelope. Old. With your name on it. From Tom? I think so. The agent placed a sealed, yellowing envelope on the table. The script was unmistakable. Tom's square, careful letters. For Margaret. When you finally leave. The room tilted, just slightly, not from grief, from the weight of being seen across time. She didn't open it. Not yet. She placed it on the shelf next to a slim paperback of poems and turned the flap away from her. Readiness is a kind of reverence, she decided. She would open it on the day she felt steady enough to receive whatever it held, whether blessing or instruction. Boundary didn't mean exile. She still met Emma every Sunday. They chose the same park bench near the pond, the one the ducks had claimed as co-owners. Emma brought drawings, a house with a crooked chimney, 2 hands holding a coffee cup, a photo of a door printed from her mother's phone, colored over in bright chalk. "Is this your new house?" Emma asked. "It's my new life," Margaret said. "A house can come later, or not." They talked about school, about the art teacher who rescued bent paintbrushes, about how winter makes even strong trees look like bones. Sometimes Emma's words snagged on something sharp. "Mom says you abandoned us." "No," Margaret said softly. "I stopped abandoning myself." "Is that different?" "It is." Emma nodded slowly. "Can you teach me how?" "We can practice together," Margaret said, and meant it. On the 3rd Sunday, Andrew came. He stood 10 steps away, hands jammed in a jacket he hadn't earned, face older by weeks. He didn't sit. He didn't apologize. He watched his daughter laugh, and that was something. When Emma ran to the swings, he approached the bench like a man approaching the truth. "I got the car insurance sorted," he said. "I'm delivering for a while. It's fine." "Fine is a place to start," Margaret said. He kept staring at the pond. "The house looks good. The new people fixed the back steps." "Tom was forever promising to do those," she said, and they both smiled for half a breath. "Mom," he started, then corrected himself. "Margaret." She heard the effort in that second word. "I'm trying," he said. "I know," she answered. He looked down. "I thought, if you left, it meant you didn't love us anymore." "It meant I started loving me also," she said. "That's a bigger math than subtraction." He nodded. No apology yet, but the ground had stopped sliding. After he left, Emma pressed a sticker into Margaret's palm, a small gold star. "For doing a hard thing," the girl said. Margaret put it on the inside cover of the notebook, a private medal. The studio grew into her. She bought a proper lamp, a kettle that didn't squeal, a second-hand rug, soft as old stories. On Wednesdays, she joined a small group at the community center. Women and a few men, gray at the temples, all practicing the art of boundaries without bitterness. No one shared names publicly. They shared scripts. "Thank you for asking. My answer is no." "I don't have capacity for that." "That belongs to you." They recited those lines like first graders learning letters. In a way, they were. At home, she wrote letters she would never send. To the young version of herself who apologized for taking up space. To Clara, naming harm without detonating blame. To Tom, reporting that the world was still tender and absurd, that the apple tree was in good hands, that she had finally traded martyrdom for a morning routine. On a Thursday morning, the library director asked if she'd speak with a small circle of staff about elder respect. "Not a speech," the woman said, "just what you've learned." Margaret considered the request, then nodded. In a quiet room behind the stacks, she spoke without notes. "I learned that love is verbs," she said. "Not invoices, not ultimatums, verbs." She told them about paying everything and then paying attention, about how exhaustion wears the same coat as loyalty, about leaving a home so she could re-enter her life. When she finished, no one clapped. One librarian simply whispered, "Thank you for making a map." Maps, Margaret thought later, don't pull you. They just keep you from walking in circles. Clara called that evening. It was late. Her voice was flat from crying she would never admit. "I'm not calling to fight," she said. "I'm not either," Margaret answered. "Emma misses the old afternoons." "So do I." Silence stretched, not hostile, just careful. "I've started a bookkeeping course," Clara said. "I'm not good at numbers yet." "I wasn't either," Margaret said. "Then I learned that numbers are boundaries in ink." Clara laughed once, a short, surprised sound. "I was cruel to you," she said. The words emerged like metal being bent. "Yes," Margaret said. "Not generous erasure, not softening, a fact placed gently on a table. "I don't know how to fix it," Clara said. "You can't," Margaret replied. "You can change it." "How?" "By not choosing it again." Clara breathed, a long exhale into the phone. "Can we meet to set rules?" "We can meet to make requests," Margaret said. "Rules will come later." Okay. They settled on a Saturday. They picked a cafe with a window seat. Two adults learning how to be two adults. When the call ended, Margaret stared at the ceiling until the clock blinked midnight. Tom had once told her that courage is not a shout. It's a hand that still opens the door tomorrow. Money, which had once been a tool turned trap, became simple again. She set up 3 envelopes each month. Give, keep, grow. Give went to the fund she'd created for older adults being pushed out of their own lives. Keep covered rent, groceries, a small jar of decent jam. Grow went into a savings account with no name in the memo line. Not Italy, not a car, not a new couch, just a muscle. She liked watching it flex. On a quiet afternoon, she drafted a small scholarship in Tom's name for students who looked after grandparents at home. Not for grades, for steadiness, for patience that could not be graded but could save a life. The application was 1 page. 1 question. "Tell me about a time you did the right thing when no one was clapping." She told no one about the scholarship except Diane and the library director. Praise had always made her uncomfortable. The work itself felt sufficient. That, she realized, was new. In February, the buyers invited her over. If you're comfortable, she was. The door opened to renovated light, new paint without the smell of erasure, frames on the wall that included the house, not just the people inside it. In the hallway, the floorboards shone. Near the baseboard was a tiny scar left on purpose. "The scratch?" the new owner said with a grin. "The one from the little metal car? We kept it. It belongs." "It does," Margaret said. She didn't cry. She placed her palm on the warm wood and said, "Thank you," to someone who would never hear it. Before she left, the older mother, the one with the cane, touched Margaret's wrist. "Good bones," the woman said again. Margaret wasn't sure whether she meant the house or the person, maybe both. On the walk back, she bought 2 apples from a street vendor. Bit into one. It was tart and clean. It tasted like something that had chosen sun and survived wind. She slept through the night for 3 nights in a row. On the 4th, a dream woke her. Tom, on the old porch, in his imperfect tie. He said nothing. He only pointed at the bookshelf inside the studio where the sealed envelope waited. She could almost feel the paper between her fingers. When she woke, the room was blue with earliest morning. She got out of bed, crossed to the shelf, and held the envelope close enough to read the pressure of the pen in his strokes. For Margaret, "When you finally leave." Her hand trembled. Not with fear, with recognition. She set it down again. "Not yet," she told him in the quiet. "Almost." On Saturday, she met Andrew and Clara at the cafe with the window seat. They arrived together, not holding hands but not apart. The waiter poured water and left them alone. No scripts, just 3 cups, 3 small plates, a table that would outlast them all. "I want to say this clearly," Margaret began. "My boundary isn't punishment, it's oxygen. I can't lend you air anymore." Andrew nodded, eyes clear and wet. "I hear you," he said. "I don't like it, but I hear you." Clara swallowed. "I'm learning to budget," she said. "I can show you what I've started. If you'd look at it." "I will look," Margaret said. "I won't fix." Clara nodded. "That's fair." They made requests, not demands. Emma on Sundays without interrogation. No financial asks by text, no insults stapled to stress. If someone raised their voice, the conversation ended. They wrote it down like a treaty. They signed with their full names. A treaty is not peace, but it is not war. When they stood to leave, Andrew hesitated. "Mom," he said, choosing the word on purpose. "Can I hug you?" She opened her arms. He stepped in. He smelled like winter and laundry soap and the boy he had been. "Thank you for not rescuing me," he whispered. "Thank you for rescuing yourself," she answered. Clara put a hand on Margaret's shoulder. "Thank you for meeting us," she said. "Thank you for coming," Margaret replied. They were all practicing gratitude as a second language. Outside, the afternoon was the color of pewter. Wind pushed leaves into small, polite piles. Margaret walked slowly back to the library, feeling the kind of tired that follows honest work. She climbed the stairs, set her bag down, and finally reached for the envelope. Hands older now, steadier now. She slipped a finger under the brittle flap and broke the seal with the softest tear. Inside was a single folded page and a photograph. The photo showed Tom on the porch holding a wooden sign she had never seen. The sign said, "Home is where you are yourself." She unfolded the letter, Tom's hand, careful even in weakness. If you are reading this, it means you remembered the difference between staying and belonging. It means you left the house to keep the home. I am proud of you, future you, who learned to be gentle and firm at once. There is a key taped under the last stair tread, not for a door, for a box in the safety deposit at First Harbor Bank. I kept something there that belongs to your next life. Go claim it. And if the world calls you a parasite, smile. Parasites take. You, my love, kept giving. Now take your turn. She stood there a long time, letter against her chest, eyes open, breathing like a person who had remembered sky. A key, a box, another door she had not even known existed. She sat down slowly, placed the letter on the table, and looked at the clock. First Harbor Bank closed at 4 on Saturdays. It was 3:12. She slipped on her coat, picked up the notebook, tucked the letter carefully inside. On her way out, she paused at the tin tag on the sill. Real owner. "Yes," she said aloud to no one and to everyone. "I'm coming." She took the stairs 2 at a time. The street outside was bright, as if the day itself had been waiting. She walked fast, then faster, not running from, moving toward. At the bottom of the old library steps, the wind lifted her scarf and carried it forward like a flag. At the First Harbor Bank, the floor gleamed like still water. Margaret walked in, holding the letter close to her chest. The teller, a young man with gentle eyes, smiled politely. "Good afternoon. How can I help you?" "I have a key," she said, showing him the small brass one wrapped in paper. He nodded. "Safety deposit, I assume." A few signatures later, they led her into the quiet back room lined with gray metal drawers, each one identical, each one holding the private archaeology of a life. The attendant left her alone. She slid the key into box 1123. It clicked open with a small sigh, as if relieved to see her again. Inside, a wooden box, hand-carved, the kind Tom used to make in the garage during winters. On top lay another note in his square handwriting. "If you're here, it means you chose life again." "Open gently." She lifted the lid. Inside, wrapped in faded blue cloth, was a small stack of envelopes tied with red string. Letters he'd written during his last months but never sent. And beneath them, a small velvet pouch. Her fingers trembled as she untied the string. Each letter began the same way. "Dear Margaret, if you are reading this, it means I didn't have the words then." They weren't love letters, they were maps. Tom wrote about fear. His fear of leaving her alone, his guilt for not having said thank you enough, his worry that their son had inherited his stubbornness but not his humility. In one letter he wrote, "Promise me you won't shrink to fit anyone's comfort, not even mine. The world doesn't need smaller women. It needs steadier ones." Tears blurred the ink. She laughed once, softly through the ache. "You never were wrong about that, Tom," she whispered. She opened the velvet pouch. Inside was a thin gold bracelet and a folded note. "For the day you forgive yourself for staying too long." She put the bracelet on. It felt light. Not jewelry, permission. Outside, The city had tilted into afternoon. She stepped out of the bank and breathed the cold air like oxygen she'd earned. Traffic roared, children shouted across the street, and somewhere a busker played a slow blues tune on an old harmonica. She walked without purpose, only direction. Her feet led her to the park again, the one near the duck pond. Emma was there with Clara, tossing crumbs into the water. When they saw her, Emma's face lit up. "Grandma, you came." "I did," Margaret said, kneeling, "just in time for the encore." Clara smiled, hesitant but sincere. "You look lighter," she said. "I found something that was waiting for me," Margaret answered. They sat together on the same bench, the same wooden slats that had held so many difficult words. Emma kept feeding ducks while the two women talked softly. Clara said she had a new client, her bookkeeping finally finding rhythm. Margaret told her about the scholarship. For the first time, pride and peace shared the same space. A wind came through, playful and cold. Emma tucked herself under Margaret's arm. "I'm glad you didn't disappear," the girl murmured. "I couldn't," Margaret said. "You're too easy to find." That evening, she returned to the studio, made tea, and placed Tom's letters neatly in a box on the shelf. Then she opened her notebook. One more page to fill. Step 6. Remember that peace is not the absence of people. It's the presence of yourself. She underlined it twice. On the desk, the bracelet caught the lamp's glow, scattering soft circles of light against the wall. Each shimmer looked like a door. Small, reachable, open. She picked up the phone and called Diane. "Still thinking of selling the car?" Diane asked after the usual greetings. "Maybe," Margaret said. "But not yet. It's good to have something that knows the road." "Where to next?" "I was thinking of the coast," she said. "Tom always wanted to see the Pacific." "Want company?" "Not this time," Margaret said. "I need to talk to him alone for a bit." A month later, she packed a small suitcase, clothes, notebook, one book of poems, Tom's bracelet, and the box of letters. She boarded a bus west. Outside the window, fields melted into mountains, mountains into light. Each mile felt like a prayer, each rest stop like a small rebirth. At sunset, she reached the coast. The sky was fire, the sea molten glass. She walked barefoot across the sand, wind tangling her silver hair, waves whispering names she'd already forgiven. She opened the last letter from Tom, the only one still sealed. "When you reach the ocean, look at it until you stop needing answers. You've done enough, my love. Let the tide say the rest." She stood there for a long time, watching the horizon pull light from the dying sun. The water touched her feet, cold, clean, honest. A seagull cried somewhere above, and she laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was finally okay. She let the letter slip from her fingers. The wind caught it, lifting it just above the water, where it danced briefly before dissolving into the waves. She whispered, "Goodbye, Tom," then added, "Hello, me." The next morning, she mailed a small package to Andrew and Clara. Inside was a copy of Tom's letter, the one about steadiness, and a note in her handwriting. "Teach this to Emma and to yourselves. Love isn't about who pays, it's about who stays." Then she closed her notebook for the last time. At the bottom of the page, she wrote, "Final step. Live like the storm already passed." Outside, gulls cried again. The tide came in, erasing footprints she didn't need anymore. Margaret turned toward the rising sun, her silhouette long and unafraid against the glowing horizon. And for the first time in years, maybe in forever, she didn't just exist, she lived.